Everyone has been talking about Mat Armstrong's new house in Miami, and for good reason. The place looks amazing at first glance. People are excited about the cars, the wide open space, and the clean modern design. Social media is full of comments about how impressive everything looks. But while most people are focused on the obvious things, there is one part of this whole setup that almost nobody is really paying attention to. And surprisingly, that part might actually be one of the best transformations in the entire project. It is not a car, it is not a flashy upgrade, and it is not something loud or dramatic at first glance. Instead, it is something much more subtle, but once you notice it, you realize how important it really is. It completely changes how the entire space feels and works. When you first look at the garage, it may seem normal. It looks like a clean, simple area where cars will be parked and worked on. But if you take a closer look, you begin to understand that this space went through a serious transformation. This was not just a small upgrade or a quick fix. This was a full reset of the entire garage. Before the changes started, the garage had several issues that most people would ignore. The floor was uneven in many places. The tiles were outdated, and the layout itself was not making the best use of the space. There was even a wall that blocked part of the area, making it feel smaller and less open. These problems may not seem like a big deal at first, but when you are working with high-end cars and try and create a premium environment, small details like these matter a lot. What makes this transformation interesting is how quickly everything started. There was no long planning phase or slow preparation. The decision was made, and the team moved fast. They traveled from another country, arrived in a completely new environment, and immediately got to work. This added a new level of pressure to the project. They were no longer in their usual setup, where everything is familiar and easy to manage. Instead, they had to adapt to a new location, new conditions, and new challenges. This kind of situation can easily lead to mistakes or delays, but it also creates an opportunity to show real skill and teamwork. As soon as the work began, it was clear that this was not going to be a simple job. The team quickly realized that they had to remove everything that was already there before they could start building something new. This meant breaking down walls, removing tiles one by one, and preparing the floor from scratch. It was messy, loud, and physically demanding work. Dust filled the air, and the process required patience and focus. This is the part that most people never see or think about. They only see the final result, which looks smooth and perfect, but they do not see the hard work that goes into making it. That waypoint, one of the key decisions in this transformation, was the choice of flooring. Instead of using standard tiles again, they decided to go with epoxy resin flooring. This choice changed everything. Epoxy is not just about looks. It is about quality, durability, and precision. Unlike tiles, epoxy does not hide mistakes. It actually shows every small detail, which means the surface underneath has to be perfectly prepared. This makes the process more difficult, but it also makes the final result much more impressive. When done correctly, epoxy creates a smooth, reflective surface that looks almost like glass. It turns a basic garage into something that feels more like a showroom. This is why this part of the project deserves more attention. It may not be as exciting as a car build, but it plays a huge role in the overall transformation. It changes how the space looks, how it feels, and how it is used. It shows that sometimes the most important upgrades are not the ones that get the most attention, but the ones that quietly improve everything around them. And as the project continues, it becomes clear that this garage transformation is not just about making things look better. It is about creating a space that matches the level of everything else in the house. As the project moved forward, the situation quickly became more intense than anyone expected. Traveling to a new country for a job like this already brings a lot of pressure, but in this case, everything felt even more urgent. There was no long timeline, no slow setup, and no chance to ease into the work. From the moment the team arrived in Miami, it was clear that they had to move fast and deliver high-quality results without delay. This kind of environment can be difficult, even for experienced professionals, because it requires quick thinking, strong teamwork, and the ability to solve problems on the spot. Unlike their usual projects in the UK, where they know exactly where to get tools and materials, here they had to figure everything out in a completely new place. When they first stepped into the garage, the excitement was there, but so were the challenges. At a glance, the space looked large and full of potential. But once they started inspecting it more closely, the problems became obvious. The floor was not in good condition. It was covered in tiles that were uneven and worn out. Some areas were slightly raised, while others dipped down, making the surface inconsistent. For a normal garage, this might not seem like a big issue, but for a high-end setup, it was unacceptable. A perfect finish requires a perfect base, and right now, the base was far from ready. On top of that, there was a wall that did not serve much purpose but still blocked part of space, making the garage feel smaller than it actually was at this point. The team had to make a decision. They could try to work around the existing setup and save time, or they could remove everything and start fresh. Choosing the second option meant more work, more effort, and more risk, but it was the only way to achieve the level of quality they were aiming for. So, without wasting time, they got started. The wall had to come down first. Breaking it apart was not easy, but it immediately began to open up the space. As the pieces were removed, the garage started to feel larger and more flexible. This was an important step because it allowed them to reimagine how the space could be used. Next came the tiles, and this part of the process was even more demanding. Removing tiles is not a quick job, especially when they are firmly attached to the floor. Each piece had to be carefully broken and taken out one by one. It was slow, repetitive work that required patience. Dust and debris quickly filled the area, making the environment uncomfortable and difficult to work in. But this step was necessary. Leaving even a small section of old tiles could affect the final result. And with epoxy flooring, there is no room for shortcuts. Everything had to be cleared completely so that the surface underneath could be properly prepared as the demolition continued. The team also had to deal with the mental pressure of staying on schedule. Working in a new country meant that delays could become much bigger problems than usual. If something went wrong, it would not be as easy to fix as it would be back home. This added a constant sense of urgency to every task. Every decision had to be made carefully, but also quickly. There was no time to overthink or second-guess. This balance between speed and precision is what made the project so challenging. Despite all these difficulties, there was also a sense of momentum building. As more of the old structure was removed, the vision for the new garage became clearer. The team could start to imagine what the finished space would look like. This helped keep everyone motivated, even during the toughest parts of the work. It also showed the importance of preparation. Before they could create something impressive, they had to remove everything that was holding the space back. This stage of the project may not have looked exciting from the outside, but it was one of the most important steps in the entire transformation. After the tiles were finally removed and the space was cleared, the project entered one of the most important and physically demanding stages, preparing the floor for the epoxy. This part of the process is often overlooked because it does not look impressive on camera, but in reality, it is where the true quality of the final result is decided. Without proper preparation, even the best materials will fail to deliver the desired finish. The team knew this very well, which is why they took the stage seriously and did not rush through it. The next step was grinding the entire floor, and this is where the real effort began. Grinding the floor is not just about smoothing the surface. It is about removing every imperfection, every bump, and every hidden flaw that could affect how the epoxy settles later. The machines used for this process are heavy, loud, and difficult to control. As soon as the grinding started, the environment changed completely. The noise filled the space, making communication harder, and dust began to spread everywhere, even with protective equipment. It was not an easy job. The heat, the constant vibration, and the effort required to handle machines made it exhausting work. This is the kind of task that many people would try to avoid, but it is also the kind of task that separates a basic job from a professional one. What makes epoxy flooring different from other options is that it does not hide mistakes. Instead, it highlights them. If the surface underneath is not perfectly prepared, every flaw will become visible once the epoxy is applied. This means that even a small crack or uneven area can ruin the entire look. Because of this, the team had to inspect the floor carefully as they worked. Grinding was not just done once. It had to be done thoroughly, with attention to every section of the garage. They moved slowly and carefully, making sure that no area was left untreated. It was a time-consuming process, But skipping steps here would cause bigger problems later. As the grinding continued, the true condition of the floor started to reveal itself. Hidden cracks, small holes, and uneven patches became visible. These were issues that could not be ignored. Each one had to be fixed properly before moving on to the next stage. This added even more work to the process, but it was necessary to ensure a strong and smooth foundation. The team began filling cracks and repairing damaged areas, taking extra care to make the surface as even as possible. This attention to detail may not seem exciting, but it is what makes the final result look flawless. During this stage, there was also a noticeable shift in mindset. At the beginning of the project, the focus was on speed and getting things started quickly. But now, the focus changed to precision and patience. Everyone understood that this was not the moment to rush. Taking extra time here would save time later by preventing mistakes and rework. It was a clear example of working smarter, not just harder. Even though the work was tiring and repetitive, the team stayed focused because they knew how important this step was. Another interesting part of the stage was how it showed the difference between what people see and what actually happens behind the scenes. From the outside, a finished epoxy floor looks smooth, shiny, and simple. It is easy to assume that it was quick to create, but the reality is very different. Hours of grinding, repairing, and cleaning are required before the first layer of epoxy is even applied. This hidden effort is what gives the final result its quality and durability. By the time the grinding and repairs were complete, the garage looked completely different from when they started. It was no longer a space covered in old tiles and uneven surfaces. Instead, it was a clean, prepared area ready for the next stage of transformation. This moment marked a turning point in the project. The hardest physical work was mostly done, and now they could begin building something new on top of a solid foundation. Just when everything started to feel under control, and the project was moving in the right direction, an unexpected problem appeared that could have changed everything. Up to this point, the team had been working hard to prepare the garage, handling all the heavy tasks like demolition, grinding, and repairs. They had built momentum, and it finally seemed like they were ready to move into the more satisfying stages of the transformation. But in projects like this, things do not always go as planned. Sometimes, problems show up at the worst possible time, and how you deal with them makes all the difference. The issue came from something they did not fully control: the equipment supply. The company that was supposed to provide tools and support for the job suddenly stepped away in the middle of the project. There was no clear warning, no proper explanation, and no backup plan ready. One moment, everything seemed fine, and the next moment, the team was left without the tools they needed to continue their work. This situation could have caused serious delays. Working in a different country made it even more difficult, because they could not simply go back to their usual suppliers or rely on familiar contacts. Finding the right equipment quickly in a new place is not always easy, especially when time is limited. At this point, the pressure increased again. The team had already invested time and effort into preparing the garage, and stopping now would have wasted that progress. Delays could also affect the overall schedule and create frustration for everyone involved. It was a moment where things could have gone in a negative direction. However, instead of slowing down or giving up, the team focused on finding a solution. This is where experience and connections became extremely important point when the key members of the team reached out to trusted contacts for help. This decision showed the value of building strong relationships in any industry. When you have reliable people around you, you are never completely stuck, even in difficult situations. After making a few calls, help arrived in the form of another team who brought the necessary tools and support. This quick response changed everything. What could have turned into a major delay was solved in a relatively short time, allowing the project to continue without losing too much momentum. This moment may not seem as exciting as a visual transformation of the garage, but it is one of the most important parts of the entire story. It highlights the reality of working on projects like this. Things do not always go smoothly, and unexpected problems are almost guaranteed to happen. What matters is how you respond. In this case, the team stayed calm, acted quickly, and used their network to solve the problem. This level of professionalism is what keeps projects moving forward, even when things go wrong. Another important aspect of this stage was teamwork. Everyone understood that they were working toward the same goal, and no one stepped back when challenges appeared. Instead, they supported each other and kept pushing forward. Even Matt himself was involved in the process, which added to the overall energy of the project. Seeing the owner actively participate, rather than just watching from a distance, created a stronger sense of motivation for the entire team. It showed that this was not just another job, but something that everyone genuinely cared about. Once the new tools arrived and the problem was resolved, the project quickly returned to its original pace. In some ways, this challenge even made the team stronger. They had faced a difficult situation and managed to overcome it, which built confidence for the next stages of the work. It also served as a reminder that success in projects like this is not just about skill or planning, but also about adaptability and resilience. By the end of this stage, the garage was fully prepared. The tools were back in place, and the team was ready to move forward again. The foundation had been set both physically and mentally. Now, they could focus on the next step, which would finally begin to reveal the visual transformation everyone had been waiting for. With the major problem solved and the preparation work finally complete, the project moved into a much more satisfying stage: the application of the base coat. This is a point where the transformation truly begins to take shape. And for the first time, the garage starts to look less like a construction site and more like a finished space. However, even though this stage looks cleaner and more organized from the outside, it still requires a high level of precision and attention to detail. The team understood that this was not just about pouring material onto the floor. It was about creating a strong and even foundation for everything that would come next. The first step in this stage was making sure that every small imperfection left behind from the grinding process was properly fixed. Even after hours of preparation, there can still be tiny cracks, holes, or uneven spots that need extra attention. The team carefully went over the entire surface again, filling in these areas and smoothing them out. This process may seem repetitive, but it is extremely important. Epoxy flooring depends on the condition of the surface underneath, and any mistake at this stage can affect the final look. By taking the time to fix every detail, they ensured that the base coat would bond properly and create a smooth, consistent layer. Once the surface was fully prepared, it was time to apply the epoxy base coat. This moment marked a clear shift in the project. Up until now, most of the work had been about removing, cleaning, and fixing. Now, they were finally adding something new. The epoxy started as a liquid, and as it was poured onto the floor, it spread slowly across the surface. Using specialized tools, the team worked carefully to distribute it evenly. This required steady hands and a good understanding of how the material behaves. If applied too quickly or unevenly, it could create bubbles, streaks, or weak spots. As the base coat covered more and more of the floor, the visual change became obvious. The rough, dusty surface that once filled the garage was replaced by a smooth, glossy layer. It reflected light in a way that made the entire space feel brighter and cleaner. Even though this was only the first layer, already looked impressive. When Matt saw it, he compared it to an ice rink, and that description made sense. The surface was flat, shiny, and almost mirror-like, giving the garage a completely different feel from before. However, this stage was not just about appearance. The base coat also played a crucial role in the strength and durability of the floor. It acted as a foundation for the design layer that would come later. If the base was not applied correctly, the final result would not last as long or look as good. This is why the team did not rush, even though they were excited to see progress. They worked methodically, making sure that every section of the floor was covered properly and evenly. After the base coat was applied, the team had to wait for it to dry. This waiting period is another important part of the process. It may seem like a pause in the action, but it allows the material to settle and harden. During this time, any remaining imperfections can become visible. Small bubbles or uneven areas may appear, and these need to be corrected before moving on to the next step. Instead of ignoring these issues, the team went back and fixed them carefully. In some cases, they even added an extra layer to ensure a flawless finish. This stage highlights an important lesson about quality work. It is not just about doing the job once and moving on. It is about checking, correcting, and improving until the result meets a high standard. Many people might be tempted to skip these extra steps to save time, but that often leads to problems later. By taking the time to do it right, the team ensured that the final design would look as good as possible and last for years by the end of the stage. The garage had already undergone a dramatic change. It was no longer just a prepared space. It was starting to become something special. The smooth, reflective base coat set the stage for the next phase of the transformation, where the real design and creativity would come into play. After all the preparation, repairs, and careful application of the base coat, the project finally reached the most exciting stage, the design phase. This is the moment where all the hard work starts to pay off visually. Up until now, the focus had been on creating a strong and perfect foundation, but now it was time to turn that foundation into something unique and eye-catching. The garage was no longer just a workspace. It was about to become a statement piece. Everyone on site understood the importance of this stage, because this is what people would notice first when they walked into the space. The design chosen for the floor was a marble style effect, created using a combination of 3 colors, 2 shades of gray and white. At first, this might sound simple, but the way these colors are applied makes all the difference. This is not a random process where the material is poured without thought. Instead, it requires careful planning, control, and a good sense of timing. The epoxy is still in a liquid state during this stage, which means it can move and blend in natural ways. The team used this to their advantage, placing the colors in specific areas and then spreading them gently to create a flowing pattern. As the work began, the atmosphere in the garage changed. There was a sense of focus and anticipation, because this stage could not be rushed or corrected easily once completed. Each movement had to be deliberate. The team worked slowly, guiding the epoxy across the floor, watching how the colors mixed and adjusted themselves. This is where skill and experience really showed. Creating a marble effect that looks natural is not easy. If done incorrectly, it can look messy or uneven. But when done right, it creates a smooth, elegant pattern that looks almost like real stone. One of the most interesting parts of this process is that the epoxy continues to move slightly even after it has been applied. This means that the design can improve on its own as it settles. The team understood this and allowed material to do part of the work naturally. Instead of trying to control every detail, they found a balance between guiding the design and letting it develop. This approach helped create a more organic and realistic finish. It also added a level of uniqueness, because no 2 epoxy designs turn out exactly the same. After the design was completed, the team had to leave it overnight to cure. This waiting period was important, not just for the strength of the floor, but also for the final look. As the epoxy hardened, the colors settled into place, and the glossy finish became more pronounced. The next morning was a moment everyone had been waiting for, the reveal. Walking into the garage after the floor had fully set was a completely different experience. The transformation was clear immediately. The floor no longer looked like a simple surface to walk on. It looked like a piece of art. The marble effect created depth and movement, while the glossy finish reflected light across the entire space. The garage felt brighter, cleaner, and far more premium than before. It no longer felt like a basic storage area for cars. Instead, it felt like a showroom, a place where every detail had been carefully designed to match the quality of the vehicles inside. When Matt arrived and saw the finished result, his reaction said everything. Sometimes, words are not needed to explain how successful a project is. The way someone responds naturally can show the true impact of the work. In this case, it was clear that the transformation had exceeded expectations. What started as an uneven, outdated garage had been turned into a high-end, custom-designed space that, in the end, this transformation was not just about improving the look of the floor. It was about changing the entire feel of the garage. It showed how attention to detail, careful planning, and skilled execution can turn something ordinary into something exceptional. This is why this part of the project deserves more attention, because it proves that sometimes the most important upgrades are the ones that quietly transform everything around them. Looking at the finished garage, it becomes clear that this transformation was about much more than just improving the appearance of a single part of the house. It completely changed how the space feels, how it functions, and how it fits into the overall lifestyle that Mat Armstrong is building in his Miami home. At the beginning, this garage was just a basic area with tiles, uneven surfaces, and a layout that did not make full use of the available space. It did the job, but it did not match the level of the cars or the